course, we thought that he was just a friend, so my stepdaughter went back to sleep, and that was the last time anybody ever seen him. He just vanished into the night. That was Howard Adams in 2009 to KTXS News.
Welcome back to the Evidentiary podcast. This is episode number 2, where we're going to continue on with our discussion about the disappearance of Michael Jefferson Adams from Abilene, Texas.
And how have you been, Leslie, since the break? Have you been doing good?
I mean, I can't complain too much.
Me either, except I'm still out of a computer. It's a pain in the ass, but I'll get that eventually rectified. So that's why my blog's not been real active. My Facebook's been active, but not my blog. So, but I'll get around to it eventually. But you've been busy on the blog, it looks like.
Yeah. I mean, it comes and goes, so I use it when I've got it, but I've not had it the last few weeks, so it's still been a little bit quiet.
I figured we can go over just a quick refresher of part 1. Part 1, I may have, when I went back over my notes and stuff, may have got a couple of things wrong, so if some of the stuff conflicts in part 1, part 2 corrects it. The big one I did was when I was mentioning, of all things, Tammy's case. I mentioned she went missing in 84, and she went missing in 83. So I don't know how I got that one wrong. Must have been tired. That's a big one. In terms of Michael's case, if there's a discrepancy, we'll have got it right in part 2. So just go with that in terms of information. But basically, to refresh everybody, Michael Jefferson Adams was born on March 28, 1969 in Abilene, Texas. He was 6 foot and around 150 pounds. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. He was a 1987 graduate of Cooper High School, and he was going to be enrolled. He was enrolled in Texas Tech University, and he was 3 weeks shy of attending Texas Tech when he went missing. Michael worked at the M-System store located in Abilene on Mockingbird and 12th Street, and he went missing on June 8, 1987, a little before midnight that night after he closed the store. All right, so I know in the last episode we discussed the missing reward episode, and you can watch that either on YouTube, if you type in missing reward, Michael Adams, or on my blog, it's got it on there too. We discussed it, and there's a couple of things that the missing reward episode left out, which I was able to find out through a couple of different things, sources, and so on. One is the story is conflicting. I can't tell whether they add things along as the story went along and the years have went by, whether things have been added or whatnot. Initially, on the missing reward episode, it says that Cheeto and Mike were outside the store, and then, Cheeto offered him the warm beer, and they had that conversation, and then they drove home. Well, according to some sources that I was able to get a hold of, there was another person in the parking lot that night, and we discussed him a little bit. His name was Abel Gonzalez, and he actually passed away in 1996 in a rafting accident in Arizona. But apparently, according to some that I've spoken to, Abel was in the parking lot that night as well. They didn't mention that in Missing Reward, which is interesting. But if you use the Wayback Machine, the website, and you go back to look at the FindMikeAdams.com site, it does mention him being in the parking lot. I'm not sure why they left that out at Missing Reward, but it says that he was there. So me and Leslie both have tried to contact the owners or the former owners of that site, FindMikeAdams.com, and we have not been successful. So if they're listening, please give us an email, shoot us an email or something so we can try to talk to you, because we'd really like to speak to you.
Right. Our email is evidentiarypodcast@gmail.com.
So we have not been successful at that so far, but hopefully maybe we'll be able to get a hold of them. But I'm not even sure why they closed the site down, which is odd. You'd think it'd still be up, but I don't know.
I mean, there was a lot of good information on it. Maybe they just got tired of paying the fees or something for the domain. I don't know. Probably.
That could be it, too. Or they just didn't pay them and then went out of... those websites do, where you click on the link and they say that you can buy this domain or whatnot.
Right.
Part of the story, that at least on the Find Mike Adams site, it says one telling the story was Mike vanished, was that Abel and Cheeto were in the parking lot as Mike closed the store, and they all three left the parking lot, but neither Cheeto or Abel had any contact with Mike, which again is a contradiction of the Missing Reward episode. So, I mean, if that was the case, whatever Cheeto claimed about the warm beer and so on is not accurate. But having said that, police don't consider Cheeto a suspect. It says it in the Missing Reward app. And as far as I know, that he did pass his polygraph test, even though I don't lend a whole lot of credence to polygraph tests. But police have said that Cheeto they don't consider him a suspect. So, but Cheeto said that, Mike offered him a warm beer and there was no alcohol in the car, because if you remember correctly, he drove his car up to his house, and then his sister Beverly saw him outside the window talking to somebody leaning up against their car. So Cheeto said that Michael offered him a warm beer, but when Golson, who's interviewed on the Missing Reward episode, said that there was no trace of any alcohol in the trunk of Mike's car. So I know that we covered that the last one, last episode anyway. It says that according to the Find Mike Adams website, they all left. They had no contact with Mike, and then as they all left out of the parking lot, they all drove separate cars, and that Mike's was kind of sandwiched, is what they describe, between Cheeto's and Abel's car. So that kind of leaves you with an impression, but at the same time, if they're all going the same direction, I mean, you know,
right.
That didn't mean really anything. I was not able to verify the make and model of Abel's car. I'm not even able to verify. According to the website, he was there, and as far as I know, owners of that website at one time had communication with law enforcement. So
with Abel's being there, I mean, that's another contradiction from the Missing Reward episode, because it just claimed that Cheeto was the only one in the parking lot.
Right, and I don't know. I was able to verify that, but yeah, I don't know what to take of that. How to take that, really.
So how are you able to verify that?
I'll tell you after the podcast.
Okay.
And I'll let you know, but I was able to verify it, I promise.
Now that's got me curious.
Yeah, no, I figured it would. Some of these notes Leslie hasn't seen, so we try to make it as real as possible. So when we're doing the podcast, I mean, we work the case together, but we'll tackle things separately.
So we were able to verify that Cheeto's first car, he was driving it at the time that he was seen in the parking lot. It was a 1979 Monte Carlo, which coincidentally does match the description of the car that Mike's sister saw outside the bedroom window that night. Right. It does match. It does match that car, yes, ma'am. And the distinctive feature about that car actually was that the car had like a tailpipe coming out the side of the car. Not normally where the tailpipe would be, like at the back, it came out the side. Right. And that was something that apparently Beverly noticed. So I know in the first episode we did mention that there were two people that Mike knew that did have a car that matched the description. One was Cheeto, and then he had a former friend, I believe is how he was described, that was named Ernest. Right. I guess Mike was dating a girl at the time, and they had recently broke up kind of suddenly. And that the former friend was a friend of her. Her name was Sandy. There's a breakup there. Basically, I didn't do a whole lot of research on this Ernest guy because I didn't have anything to do with the disappearance of Michael. I looked kind of into that, and I just don't see anything there. But Missing Reward mentioned him, and some people online have kind of taken that out of context because they don't really explain why he's a former friend. It kind of adds some mystery to that, how they described him. But the only reason he was considered a former friend at the time was because he didn't associate with friends of the girl he just broke up with, basically, which we've all been there. Right. Another little interesting thing to note here is that apparently the car we were talking about, that was Cheeto's first car, the 79 Monte Carlo, apparently it caught fire in 1988, which was around a year after Mike's disappearance. And after that, apparently he junked the car sometime in 89. Yeah, I was able to verify that too. He did junk the car. It did catch fire, and he junked the car, so nobody knows where the car is at the moment. I mean, obviously it's junk, so it could be smashed somewhere or something, or used for spare parts, I guess. I don't know how that works, but yeah. Yeah. So how did you find that out? That's another thing I'll explain after the podcast. Shit. All right. All right, so let's go back into some of the people, because there's one person. I know it's easy to try to come down, and I kind of wanted to too. Based on the Missing Reward interview, I hate to say that because they can cut up an interview and make it seem like somebody's really bad, and Cheeto doesn't look the best in that Missing Reward episode. And I know that based on some of the writings on the Find Mike Adams site, that whoever ran that site seemed to believe Cheeto knew more, even though he passed his polygraph and the police don't consider him a suspect. They kind of had some tunnel vision on Cheeto, which is easy to do. Right. But there's another person that was supposedly worked at the store, and again, the telling, they seem to add some things over the years. So apparently it goes from the Missing Reward episode, it goes from just Cheeto being there, and then I hear that Abel Gonzalez was there. And then now I've heard over the years that there was either somebody that worked at the store, maybe not that night, but ended up showing up, or he may have worked that night, I'm not sure. But his name is John Allen Bowles, and supposedly he was either going to be there that night, they were waiting for him to show up at the parking lot, somebody was waiting for him. I don't know how the story got to John Bowles, but John Bowles is an interesting character in itself. I did cover him a little bit on the blog, He was just didn't want to cooperate at all.
No, he didn't. Basically, he was questioned twice, and he was trying to give him 2 polygraph tests, and he intentionally flunked both of them on purpose because he didn't want to cooperate. And he also left the area right after Mike disappeared, and he went to Florida. I do know that he is back in Texas, and I did try to call a number that I acquired from somebody. And I don't know if it was John Bowles that I spoke with, but he wasn't a very pleasant person to speak with. So we exchanged pleasantries, I guess you'd say. He didn't tell me anything. He didn't tell me his name or anything. And that was the end of the call. Like I said, I don't know whether that was him or not because he didn't say.
Right.
He was really hostile with me when I tried to ask him a question about the case. And from people that I know that have had contact with Bowles, he's not a very friendly person. And like I said on my blog, he does have a offense for some kind of injury to a minor child, aggravated assault or something like that he was arrested for. So I'm really not worried about calling him. He's a piece of shit. I mean, he's an asshole. But apparently he and Mike had a couple times had some issues. I don't know what that came to, what it was regarding. But I know one time, you know how they don't do it so much now, but back in the day, especially in warmer climate states, they'll have sales at department stores or retail stores, and they'll have stuff out in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And they don't have room for it because, it's overstocked. They're trying to get rid of it. So they'll leave it out there all night. And they'll either chain it up so nobody can take it, or if there's other stuff out there, what they used to do is they used to have somebody stay the night and watch it so nobody would come and steal it.
Right.
Well, Mike was assigned to do that one night overnight shift of watching all the merchandise in the parking lot, and I guess Bull showed up with a buddy and was trying to intimidate Michael. So eventually, interesting enough, Mike's supervisor, Steven, showed up out of nowhere and kind of shooed them away, which is interesting. Now, I don't know. I know, obviously, it took place before Michael disappeared. I don't know how, what time it was, the day or whatever, not the date of it. But it's kind of interesting that Steven just show up out of nowhere and shoot him away. So, but he and Mike did have some words. They did not like each other. In fact, from what I understand, John Bowles and Cheeto didn't even get along. I can't imagine this guy, just by talking to him, getting along with a whole lot of people. But apparently he had told Cheeto at one point all he would have to do is make a phone call to make somebody disappear, which is interesting in itself. The only thing against Bowles, the knock on Bowles being a good suspect, is his car apparently did not match the description of the car that Beverly seen. That's one thing, but I have not spoken. I've spoken to acquaintances of Bowles, but nobody in his family.
Right.
And I've not been able to actually even get a picture of him at all to know what he looks like or anything. So that's why it's not posted on the website. But Bowles, what do you think about that, Leslie?
He seems kind of more to have something against Mike than Cheeto would. I mean, just from his record and everything. And
like I said, with Cheeto, he hasn't have any violent offenses against him record-wise. So, and I'll let everybody know right now, I tried to speak with Cheeto. I've reached out to him, and he hasn't responded. I don't know if he saw the message or not, but I know that he probably knows that I have talked a little bit with his wife, Lisa. And just from talking to her, I personally don't believe at this point that he knows anything about Mike's disappearance, honestly. And that may differ from people online. At this point, though, I don't believe that he knows anything more than what he's already said.
Right. So, contrary to popular belief, we just kind of feel like we need to say these things to get them out there because, people are going to have questions. Mike had a girlfriend. For all intents and purposes, he was not gay.
Right. And that's been something that's been floated around quite a bit. And that's something that is just, I can't say for a fact I don't know him, but usually gay guys don't have girlfriends they break up with,
I've not really heard most. He had friends, and his friends really haven't commented on. I mean, you hang out with somebody enough, you're kind of going to get a feel for what type of person they are. So,
not that that's important or anything,
right?
But
no, definitely not.
Is not important at all. But that has been used over the years as kind of a way to impugn his character, I guess you'd say, trying to degrade him as an individual. Like I said, and neither me or Leslie have. Don't think that's anything against people that are gay or anything. That's not actually an insult, but that's been used over the years to try to impugn him. And I just don't believe.
No, that has absolutely nothing to do with what happened. Zero.
Absolutely nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
So there's also been things floating around that there was issues with Howard, with Mike's dad, but that was another thing, that there is no issues to be spoken of with his father or any other family member of mine.
Absolutely not. Like, they came from what they call kind of a blended family, and I have the same thing. I have a blended family, and that means kind of like his grandmother passed away, and then he was adopted. Well, actually, he wasn't adopted, but Howard remarried to another lady, and she had kids as well. So I have two stepbrothers, and they're just as close as brothers to me. I don't consider them stepbrothers.
Mm-hmm.
So there was normal issues in terms of families that have a blended family. But in terms of any issues with Michael directly with his stepmom or Howard, it's just nonsense. And those have been floated around too,
mm-hmm.
and that's not true.
Well, Mike was also not depressed.
No, not at all. He was looking forward to attending Texas Tech,
mm-hmm.
and
he was looking for the future.
Yeah, so
yeah.
That's another thing that's been floated around, that maybe he got tired of his family and left, and that's just not the case. And
mm-hmm.
another thing was, they like to say that there was issues, going back to the other one, with the family members.
Mm-hmm.
This will tell you one thing about Mike and how much he loved his dad. His dad was supposed to have some kind of eye surgery within the week of Mike's disappearance, and Michael actually was going to enroll a little bit later so that he can help take care of his dad after the eye surgery. So he enrolled a little bit later than he actually could have. So that tells you right there was not a whole lot of problems if he wanted to stay to help his dad. So.
No, I mean, if he was going to school, he could have easily had that as an excuse to leave, if he wanted out of the home. So,
Exactly.
And he did not do drugs.
No, that's another one that I've spoken to people in Abilene, and some of the stories in Abilene have been kind of crazy, but one of them was that maybe he was involved in drugs, and I think that kind of goes back to the Missing Reward episode where it says, Howard said something about a big drug bust that happened at Cooper High School.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how that idea came into story. I did research and tried to find this particular drug bust at Cooper High School, because in the episode he says it may have been something related to that, because Mike
mm-hmm.
was very anti-drug, and people may have considered him a snitch. But I did some research, I couldn't find it, and when I talked to Howard one of the last times, months ago, he said he spoke to the police about that, and they didn't have any record of it either. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where that came into the story. But he didn't do drugs, of course, and I think that may have been something that had been twisted along down the road about, Cooper High School having a drug bust. So I don't know. Or maybe it was somebody got caught with drugs at school, and then it kind of morphed out of control, the story anyway.
Right.
So, but those are things we wanted to cover to make sure that we got those out,
mm-hmm.
because a lot of those things on the posts and on the boards are just not accurate at all.
Yeah.
And those four things are big ones that kind of floated around the internet
mm-hmm.
for a long time.
No, they're the most prevalent ones you find when you're reading or researching and see what people have to say about the case. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, as far as the scenarios we have here of what happened, I don't think he had a reason to leave. I don't think he would have ran away. I just think he had a future he was looking forward to, and he had other outs he could take if he wasn't happy in his home life.
All right. Not to mention he left his car and his wallet there.
Right.
So those are two things you kind of need.
Definitely.
Unless he just wanted to jump on trains or something. I don't know.
No.
Be a hermit or hobo.
So, what about a stranger abduction, murder?
It's possible. I think it's possible, but you'd have to think that the guy would have been driving around and came upon Mike coming home at just the right time, and then Mike is just going to be talking to a stranger next to his car that,
Yeah, I don't see anybody leaning into a car window if you don't know who's in the car.
Exactly. So, be kind of rough. I mean, I guess it could happen. Maybe it was an acquaintance. I don't know. But still, you have to think that he more than likely, I know Beverly didn't see him get into the car, but for all intents and purposes, that's the impression you're left with.
Right. Is
that he got into the car, and whoever was in the car took him wherever. So, right. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think it's likely.
No, I mean, I don't see him getting in the car with somebody that he don't know. And him being as close as he was to the house, if somebody tried to take him, he could have easily yelled, made noise.
Yelled or, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that he could have done. I mean, he could have got away if he just ran. He was right at his door.
This is the most interesting aspect of the whole case, too, because, and we've discussed this a couple times, mm-hmm. where if I was in Mike's position, and a lot of people online thinking, well, maybe the person was armed and forced him to get into the car. This is just me, but they're going to have to shoot me. They better be a good shot, because I'm going to run, because I'm not getting in the car if somebody's pulling a gun on me telling me to get into a car. That's just not working.
No.
That's not going to happen.
And we know that in the driveway, his car was parked, and so is his stepmom's. So, I mean, if somebody pulled a gun on him, he could have easily just, used those cars and gotten to his house. It just seems unlikely.
Another thing is, we covered it in the first part, where it was customary for when he got off work to pull his mom's car out of the driveway, put his in, and then park hers behind his, because she got up for work in the morning, and it's easier for her to get out if he did that.
Right.
So that's another interesting aspect of the case, because he didn't do that before he left, He didn't do that at all. So that leads you to believe
he
that
thought he was coming back.
He was planning on coming back.
Right.
Exactly. He was coming back. That's exactly what he thought was going to happen. It's real interesting for that. Just that's something that a lot of them don't catch on the boards, and we discussed it a couple times. So
I think whatever happened to Mike, he knew who did it. That just seems like the most feasible answer to me. Someone that he knew got him in the car and murdered him.
Probably took him somewhere, maybe. Yep. I don't know. More than likely. But, I mean, at the same time, we covered Cheeto already, and at this point where I've looked into the case, I don't think that he had anything to do with it. Having said that, though, I'm not going to say that he didn't have anything to do with it at all. Based on what we've discussed with John Bowles, I can't imagine him leaning up against the car talking to Bowles like that. I mean, if what we've heard is true.
Right.
So, I mean, it has to be somebody that knew Mike, like you said, and it's really, this one is one of the bigger head scratchers. Mm-hmm. Me and you both covered a lot of cases that are head scratchers, but this one's, and usually when they're like this, too, it's usually something a lot simpler than what it seems, because you can go down rabbit holes and look at all kinds of different things and get caught up in something, and it's usually something real easy.
Right.
But at this point, it's just a head scratcher. I mean, we've covered a lot of different scenarios, but this one, I don't understand how he would get into a car with somebody that obviously he knew, or maybe he froze. Maybe somebody forced him to get in the car. They pulled a gun on him, and maybe not all people think rationally when they're presented with that situation. Maybe he did get into the car. Maybe somebody said, "Hey, if you don't get in the car, we'll just shoot your house up. We'll kill your family member inside." Something like that. Maybe something like that happened.
Right.
I don't know.
Or if there was, I've seen where there were reports that possibly two people were in the car. That's possible too. Somebody has a gun and somebody else gets out and puts him in. I don't know. It's just, that's like you said. This is the most confusing part of the case. Why did he get in the car?
Exactly. Even if somebody were to say, I still wouldn't get in the car. Maybe I would. Maybe being a husband and a dad, maybe if somebody said, we'll just go in your house with the gun, and maybe I probably would at that point. I don't know. That would really depend. But him getting in the car is really, really interesting.
Right.
So, and robbery probably wasn't a motive, considering the fact that, his wallet was there at the house still when he changed clothes earlier that day. So he didn't have anything on him, not that I know of. So.
Nope.
But again, very, very, very interesting aspect of the case. And we're going to cover a scenario, the final one we want to cover. It's really sensitive.
This one, to me, this is baloney.
It's bullshit. Basically.
I do not think that Mike's family had anything to do with his disappearance.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that's been floated around too. A couple people that I've spoken to in the Abilene area think that Mike was having so much trouble at home that Howard, and I hate to say this because I hope he doesn't listen to this part of it, to be honest with you, because like I said, when you talk to him as a person, Michael being missing is something, like you said, I think you said it in part one, he's almost holding on to find Mike, basically.
Right.
He's in his 90s, but this is something we want to cover, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's bullshit. Me and Leslie both think it's bullshit, but we want to try to cover all avenues and scenarios. So I guess we can try to go over what if Mike's family had something to do with it, but nothing logically makes sense in that aspect, but we can try to cover it. If Mike's family had something to do with his disappearance, I don't think they would pick that night after he got off work. They could have done it any time.
Exactly. They could have done something completely different than him going missing from the driveway. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't think there's any kind of, as I mentioned, people that are usually involved with a family member or anybody, like in disappearances of people, they don't tend to try to hound the media for as long as it's been to get attention for the missing person if they were involved with it.
Right.
So that makes absolutely no sense. I can't think of any logical reason why anybody would try to blame Howard or any other member of Mike's family. That kind of shit just pisses me off, and that's one of those things I can go off on a tangent on my blog with because people do stupid stuff like that. But there's always stupid people that post stupid shit like that on the internet with I don't mind it if there's a basis for it for some reason, but here there's clearly nothing there. There is nothing. But I can't even think, can you think of a scenario where that would even be logical? I mean, just try to go over it. I can't think of anything.
I mean, I just can't. There's no outstanding issues. There's no motive behind why they would do anything to Matt.
Absolutely not. No, there isn't. One that really made me mad on a board, I got blocked on a board for it because this one guy was trying to say, well, I'm just going over the scenarios. No, what he was being was an asshole, but lucky for him, I'm a bigger asshole and I'm a better asshole than he is. But he said, maybe Howard's religious and Mike was gay, and Howard was mad because Mike was gay. Well, that's trash because, like we said, he had a girlfriend. So that's definitely not something a gay person would do. Not that, again, there's anything wrong with being gay. But I've spoken to Howard actually about this. Howard is a really, really religious person, but it wouldn't have mattered to Howard if Mike was gay at all. It wouldn't have, because that's still his boy.
If you love your child, you love your child. It doesn't matter.
So that right there, I could tell when I didn't ask him that, he actually kind of brought it up because I think, again, that's something that's went around about it. That probably does conflict. We don't talk about religion. I'm not a religious person. He's very religious. The way he told me is that it doesn't matter. It didn't matter to him if he was or not. That's still his boy. So that kind of stuff right there just makes me mad when people post that kind of stuff on the board because it has nothing to do with the case at all. I can understand if there was something that would give you that impression in the case and you can kind of go with it, but just saying something stupid like that blatantly, and then other people read that crap and then it's kind of like one of those things where you were saying and it kind of gets blown out of proportion as the story gets told over and over, and that's just garbage. It's garbage. But so going back to that night real quick though, on the missing reward app it talks about the car that was seen in the area. And that's something I haven't been able to nail down. Like I said in part one, I called Abilene PD, and they didn't respond to my call. But they said the car had a flickering or maybe a defect in the headlight that made it flicker, which was interesting. And they said that Golson said himself, Tony Golson, who was actually the person in charge of the case up until probably 4 or 5 years ago. There's a Wilson, I think it's a Sergeant Wilson, I think it is, in charge of the case now. Anyways, Golson said that there had been a car that had been reported as being suspicious in the area prior to Mike coming home, which is interesting because if that car's in the area prior to Mike coming home, it probably wasn't Cheeto or Abel at that point,
Right.
Because they all left the parking lot together, depending upon which story you listen to, or they all left at the same time regardless. Each story said the same thing. They all left at the same time. So if that car is going around the area prior to Mike getting off work, it probably wasn't somebody that he closed with. So now, whether that car had anything to do with Mike's disappearance, I don't know. But they said that there was a mechanical defect in the headlight. So, and I don't believe, at least according to Cheeto's wife, his car didn't have a mechanical defect in the headlight. That's another thing. That's another part of the aspect of this case is a head scratcher. Does that car have anything to do with Mike's disappearance at all, or is that car that was just driving around?
Right. Did they? Was there any type of description of the car available by the PD?
I don't believe so. No, I don't think so. I don't believe so. Not that I can remember. You might have to look at that. Actually, on the missing reward app, I do think from memory it says the late 70s, sort of the car that Beverly saw outside the window. But yeah, I think it was the same type of model. So a late Cutlass, a Monte Carlo type of vehicle, but this one had a flickering headlight. So, and again, we were discussing this a couple weeks ago, the flickering headlight. If you're in your bedroom, because Beverly was asleep, and the lights hit her window at a certain way, it may look like it flickers, but it's not. It could have just been
reflective
coming down the road.
Right.
I wish we knew more about that aspect. Who actually, somebody call in, or did somebody say it afterwards? After Mike's disappearance, or did they call it in ahead of time? That'd be another interesting thing to try to figure out, but I haven't been able to get Abilene PD to give me a call back. I might call them again here in a week or so. That's not something I've been able to nail down either.
Well, it's something we can always update if we do get any information.
Right. So, Leslie, what do you think happened to Mike? What's your theory?
My theory is I think whoever he got in the car with that he did know. I can't really speculate on whether it was a planned homicide. I mean, who knows? They could have gone out and with the intentions of scaring him, maybe beating him up, and it just went too far, panicked, and here we are. But I don't see him getting into a car with a stranger. Like we said, even if there was, he could have yelled. I mean, there was a lot he could have done to get himself out of that situation. So I'm more inclined to believe that he's been friends with whoever did this to him.
Or do you think it's possible that somebody he knew may have picked him up asking for a favor, and they dropped him off to somebody that didn't like him.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it could have been something where they didn't even really, like, I mean, you could have been like, hey, can you go pick up Mike and bring him here, and you take him and drop him off, and don't really know anything's going to happen. You just doing a favor, and then suddenly he's missing, and then you're like, crap, I can't say anything because I'm going to get put in jail for this. I mean, there's so much that's possible, but I just think whoever he got in the car with, he knew.
Right. I'm with you on that one. I'm really, my personal gut theory is that it was related to the store. In some way, somehow, whatever happened to Mike was related to what was going on at the Adams's store. Like we said, Stephen, Mike's supervisor, was fired for embezzlement not long after. Another thing, I don't know if we covered or not, but Mike's employee file, when the police tried to get a hold of it, it was completely empty, which is really odd. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not saying that Steve is complicit or guilty of anything, but there's a lot of shadiness going on in that store that makes me believe that it was tied to the store in some way. I think the people that have worked at that store with Mike know information about what may have happened to Mike. I'm not saying that those people are guilty of anything, except for not coming forward and telling people what they should know. They're guilty of that, but I'm not saying they're guilty of any action that would have taken Mike's life.
Right. I mean, and if you're looking at the case, Mike wasn't really involved in anything that would have led to that position other than where he worked at. And like you said, there was a lot of shady happenings going on in systems at that time. And Mike was a stand-up kid. He wasn't going to, he wasn't going to sit by. I think they were scared of him. Yeah,
from what I understand, there was a lot of people that worked at that store that were in line for that promotion as well that Mike had got. And the interesting thing is, though, if you think about it, in 3 weeks he would have been out of that store anyway because he would have went to college. So why kill him if he's that much of a big deal to you in terms of the shadiness that goes on with the store? Why kill him when he's 3 weeks shy of going to Texas Tech and being gone anyway? You know? That's another interesting aspect. So that in itself leads me to believe you're probably right when you said that the intent may have been to rough him up, to get him to shut up. You know, he had caught somebody stealing, and, he didn't indicate that he knew who it was that was stealing, but I think he probably did know. Maybe he was trying to cover for them. I don't know. Or maybe he did tell Steve, and Steve just told everybody else that he didn't say he knew. But I definitely believe it was related to the store. I think people at the store that worked with him at the time know what happened. Like I said, I'm not inclined to believe at this point that Cheeto or Larden had anything to do with it at this point. Now, if I learn something down the line, that could change. At this point, though, I've spoken to his wife, and I'm going to tell you now, I came at his wife pretty boldly online, and she was very respectful to me, even coming at her the way I did. And I did that because I wanted to get her attention, because I tried to do it previously, and I didn't get her attention. So I did a different avenue this time. I'm not going to go into it, but Leslie knows. And she could have easily cursed me out, called me every name in the book, told me to go to hell, everything else, but she didn't. So she was really respectful towards me, and a lot different than whoever I spoke with that might have been Bowles was. I'll tell you that. If you sit back and put yourself in her, there's been a lot of talk online about jumping on the anti-Cheeto bandwagon, saying that he had something to do with it. It's really easy to, because he's the only person there that night that was interviewed on Missing and Reward. He's the only person that's really said anything in all those years. And he was, besides Beverly, he's the last known person to see Mike before he disappeared. So it's easy to jump on him saying he's the guilty one. I'm not saying that he is guilty or not guilty. At this point, I don't believe he had anything to do with it. It'll probably make some people that I've discussed the case with not too happy. But I haven't spoken with Cheeto directly. Like I said, I always spoke with his wife. But she was real respectful coming out, coming at me after I came at her, and I really appreciated that. But it's just one of those things. Somebody at the store had to have had something to do with it, I believe. I just don't believe somebody was driving around the neighborhood and said, oh, here's a guy that's pulled in his driveway. Let's try to kidnap and abduct him.
Right.
That doesn't make sense.
No, not at all.
So it's definitely tied to the store, and I really hope that anybody that worked at the store at the time Mike ended up disappearing that may know something needs to come forward and tell somebody.
Yeah, Howard needs to know.
He needs to know. It's just, I can't imagine. I don't know. He has other children. I've spoken to families that have had missing children before, and God forbid if that ever happened to me, I would not be able to deal with it. But I remember one time I was speaking to Donald Ochi, which is the father of Lee Ochi, and I did her story in the blog, and I told him, he's one of the strongest people I've ever talked to. But I told him, I don't know how, I don't think I could have deal with it if that happened to me. He said, yes, you could deal with it because you have other kids. You'd have to deal with it. So maybe that's what they do. But God forbid I ever have to do that. I don't know. But Howard needs to know. I urge anybody that knows anything about the case, that worked for M Systems at that time, that knows people that work at M Systems at that time. I fully believe that people that know are still in Abilene to this day, that know what happened.
Right.
I think that's where we'll leave it off at. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Michael Jefferson Adams, please contact Abilene at 915-673-8331. The person in charge of the case right now is a Sergeant Wilson, but he doesn't return your calls. But he may return your calls, not mine. So, all right.
I guess
we'll be back.
Yep, we'll be back whenever, because we've really not nailed out a time frame yet. We'll work on that.
No, we're still working on all this stuff. So, like the audio and the format and stuff. So you got to bear with us. I think that the first episode turned out pretty good by how I felt about how it was going to sound. But we're doing one of Leslie's cases next, and you want to go ahead and let them know which one we're going to be doing?
The next case we'll be covering will be the disappearance of Kenneth Saunders.
That's one of your pet cases, isn't it?
Yeah.
We will see you next time, and then, like I said, just bear with us.
Let's see you guys next time, and remember to think critically.
Think critically. Bye.
Bye.